the world has changed in the 30-some years you and I have known each other. And we're preparing students for a different world, yet we're still using basically the same methods we've used for
And you know,
the whole century.
that's just identical to the way it was in when did I come in?
You came in
68.
68.
Different, you know,
Yeah.
there's been some changes.
But you were saying the same thing then.
Absolutely, and you're saying that
Yes.
statement that you just made could have been me talking in
It was.
75. No, it's
It
right.
was, yeah.
And you see, it's accelerating. I used to make that speech, you know, that the combined knowledge and information of the world. You take this library as a good example.
Yes.
I swear. And this is,
We're sitting in what used to be the Alpha Beta when you were the president of Laverne College. We're probably in the canned soup section. And we first met, I have this down pretty well. I graduated on a Sunday, and I started to work at Laverne College on Monday. That was June 3rd, 1968, and you took over as the president on July 1st of 1968.
I would put it
So Lee Newcomer was really my first boss, because I didn't have a boss in between. Harold Fosnot was phasing out. I didn't really work directly for the president when I first started. I worked in development for a man named Jack Lasher. I was very taken by this new dynamic president. He was probably the last person I thought the Board of Trustees would select to be the president of Laverne College. But it obviously signaled that they were ready for change at Laverne, and they saw a new era, and they wanted a new leadership that took us in some new directions. And Lee really became my mentor. I was headed for public administration, and he said, "You don't want to be in public administration, you'd rather be a college president." And I watched him for a few years being a college president and thought, gee, that looks like fun, maybe I would like to be a college president. So I set my sights early on, never knowing whether I would achieve that or not. And I learned a lot from you about what to do and a few things about what not to do in my career as president. I have never worked for anyone who had more foresight or more energy or passion than you did for teaching and learning and for young people and how we could prepare them to live in this world. And I could go on and on with stories about our time together here at Laverne, but it had a real impact on my life and helped mold who I am today and how I operate and my career and my love for education and passion for education. And I think we talked about in 1968 and 69 and 70 about how do we really measure teaching and learning. We were overshadowed by a lot of institutions that had a lot of money, took nothing but the brightest students, and yet we always maintained that we probably achieved more with our students than they did. You used to say, hey, if you're in one of those selective colleges that takes nothing but rich, bright kids, you're going to have nothing but rich, bright graduates. And you may, and if they don't graduate rich and bright, you've done something to screw them up along the way. And today at Laverne, one of the things I say is we need to figure out how to measure the value added, because I think we add more value to the lives of our students maybe than a lot of those highly selective elitist institutions. Do you think that's true?
Well, I tell you, I was right when I said you should be president, because I can't say it as eloquently as you did the latter part of that's it in a nutshell, and it's said better than I was ever able to say it. I really, you know, I got really turned on before I came here with teaching and learning. That was my passion when I came here, and so that's what I was looking at when I came here. The problem with me being president was that that's the only thing I knew much about. I didn't know anything. I didn't know diddly about being president. And I don't know whether that was a problem or not. I stumbled, and Steve, you don't know how skillful you were in taking and doing things that I didn't like to do and or didn't do very well as a president. So anyway, it was very interesting.
One of your challenges when you came to Verne was accreditation, because you said we ought to really be measuring what the outcomes are, not just what the inputs are. 30 years later, we're still fighting that battle, but I want you to know we've come a long ways, and the handbook for accreditation in the Western Association of Schools and Colleges is now being rewritten, and it's to look at outcomes rather than just measuring how many books are in the library and how many full-time faculty do we have and what's the endowment per student.
That's progress.
Could you talk about some of those battles you had with Kay Anderson and the Western Association of Schools and Colleges, because you were really a pioneer in taking them on?
As I stated previously a bit, that was my passion when I came here. That's what I did when I was superintendent up in Las Vegas, and that's what I did before I went up there as an assistant superintendent in Covina Valley. It was saying that, that teaching is the means and learning is the end. And the purpose of teaching is learning. And we were making some real inroads in public education. Came to the college level, and what a fruitful, or whatever I want to say, what a place this was to get at that problem, because higher education messed that up worse. Their criteria and Kay Anderson's and the credit was a perfect example. So I really took that on head on, as you know, and I took that on before, like I said, up in Nevada, where I cleared the legislature and allowed we got the legislature to agree that you didn't have to take U.S. history when you were a junior in high school. You didn't have to take it. You had to learn it. You had to know it. But you didn't have to take it. That was huge. And I carried that with me down in Newport. And here was the most fruitful ground in the world, because, quite frankly, a president of a small college has a lot more power than the superintendent of schools. That's debatable. We could talk about that, but I did it not too skillfully, too much conflict. I didn't know any other way to do it, and.
But your challenge was not how many hours a student sat in a seat, and not even whether or not the student took the course, but did the student know what it was we wanted him or her to know?
You know where we really ran into that? When we started to have off-campus classes on military bases and other places, and that's when the accrediting agency said, you can't do that. And that's when I made that statement so many times. It's not only time, it's not seat hours. And the Carnegie unit, is based essentially, and I could be wrong if I can't, my memory's not that good. I think you got 3 units for taking a semester course for 3 hours a day, 3 days a week. And that was worth.
Yes, the Carnegie unit is a measurement of how many hours you spend in class in the course of the semester.
And that was the criteria. And that was such a perfect thing to fight. You see, I don't think anybody that I could ever talk to or debate with, I couldn't win that debate or that argument. And so I wouldn't give up on that one. And we took it through we challenged courses here. Remember
I do.
And I said, I made this statement. I said, you know, we don't get maybe the cream of the crop here, but we get some darn good students. And they're kids who have taken English, had seat time. They've taken English every year since they were in the 6th grade. And you know, then they come to college, not just this college, every college. And you have English 101, a required course, which is a little bit of composition writing and some literature and some. But I made the statement. I think that even our kids maybe aren't the brightest. I'll bet you that X percent, I can't remember what I said now, could demonstrate that they know they could pass your final examination or your semester exam or whatever it is in that course without ever putting a foot in your class. But when they come here, why should they have to sit there if they know that? And so the faculty went along with that. That's a persuasive argument, and they went along with it, and so we challenged it. And you know what? I created one of the biggest problems we had when I was here, because we had something like, I don't know, 5 or 4 or I don't know how many English professors, and most of them taught English. They taught English 101, and then they got to teach their neat courses like Russian literature or American literature and whatever, all the stuff they liked to do, or writing, creative writing. But that was the basic course. Everybody had to do that. Well, now that they no longer had to, we had more teachers than we needed. And my other kick, of course, was efficiency. And so we had to let a teacher go. And in the process of doing it, we lost one of the greatest teachers, I think, this institution, one of the very best.
That's true.
Katie
Furman.
Katie Furman.
Yes.
Fantastic. She wasn't the one that was scheduled to go, but everybody got so upset about that. Remember when this is? This is the late 60s and the early 70s.
The beginning of the revolution.
Yeah, they're the flower children in the revolts and do that kind of stuff. And so all hell broke loose, and Katie resigned in protest. Katie was the most popular teacher on campus. That was a blow, and that said to me, Newcomer, you may be right, but it isn't good enough to just be right. And that's more than you would. The basic philosophy, though, is really that you're accountable for results, for outcomes. How do you know whether you've gotten your money's worth here? I maintain that the only way you're going to know whether a student gets their money's worth here is what they do when they get through. And in essence, you know, it's the result of, in my opinion, that's why I love the undergraduate program. Remember my 3 questions?
Yes. How could I forget those 3 questions? They're indelibly burned in my mind. And
I still talk about them, and I still give speeches about them, and I write columns about them, and I just think, I don't know where I really picked them up, but I think they're just right on target, you see, and that's what the college. So it isn't enough just to know. You know, so I say, if they can pass the final exam for English, they shouldn't take it, right? Or they shouldn't have to take it, or any other thing. They shouldn't. That's what LB-CAP is about. But the concept was, you had to know who you were and where you were going. And
question number 1.
Yeah. Who am I? And that was the, you know, that's not a question. That's the question that appealed like mad to those 60s kids. And the 70s. That's why we had no problem getting kids. And I mean, we did pretty well. Remember when we get the parents and the kids together?
Yes.
And we talk to them, they get all excited about who am I, you know. And the parents would get all excited about the third one, you know, what's going to be my role in it all. The middle one was the typical liberal arts curriculum. That's what's the nature and meaning of man, and that's the religious question. That's what it's all about. But you have to know who you are first. You have to know what the world is all about. That's the second one. And the third one, you know, is what's going to be my role in it. And college has never dealt with me. I mean, that's not true. They dealt with some, but that wasn't the major. And they didn't deal with who am I. Remember, I taught a class with all the freshmen, large group, and they got kids to take small groups. You probably took one of the small groups, I don't know. But and that was it was called Who Am I? And that back to your accreditation thing. They looked at this stuff and they said, this is atypical. And I said, well, take a look. What was the name of that college back east that was twice as way out as we were?
Oh, now you're reaching into the depths of my memory, and I'm not retrieving it. But I remember there was one that made us look like we were still
they were way
cutting
out,
our teeth.
Way out, that's right.
Well, interestingly, 30 years now, we have a 30-year perspective to look at, and I want to say one thing about accreditation, and that is that we have finally come around now to looking at outcomes and saying what's more important than whether you spent hours in a seat or whether you chalked up 124 or 28 units. What's more important is what were the outcomes? What did we want to accomplish with you as a student, and what did we accomplish? The challenge is going to be for our institutions to measure that and articulate it. But finally, we have achieved that, and I'm pleased to say you were only 30 years ahead of accreditation, Lee.
Well, you know, and we've done that because it's an evolutionary process.
Yes, it is.
Somebody has to
You planted the seeds.
Somebody has to bust it open, and then somebody has to finesse it.
Yeah.
And you know, now you see you're now a leader in the accreditation process. You're giving leadership to that concept. If somebody would have told Kay Anderson that 30 years ago, that you, that little punk kid that was running around with me and my gopher, my really top gopher, he would have just said, well, what in the world is education coming to?
That's right. But it's a movement, and it's across the country, and I'm pleased to see it happening, because I've maintained, as you have, that Verne makes a difference. We just haven't done the best job of articulating that difference and measuring that difference.
You know, remember I used to say that the world is our campus, and you know, other colleges. I did this. You know, we did this really for two reasons: my passion about teaching and learning and accountability and that stuff. The other was economic necessity. When we latched on to schools without failure concept, which was a hot item in public schools, we had thousands of teachers in a training program on that, for which we had all over the United States, which we made money. We made a profit. Nobody had ever heard of that. Every Pomona College, they felt they needed to. Their tuition needed to pay 50 to 60%.
Wait a minute. You're on a university campus, and you said what? Profit?
Yeah.
You just raised the hair on the back of a lot of academicians.
Well, you see.
You mean there's an economic factor to what we do? We're not here just for the good of the world. We have to have resources in order to provide that good.
And do you know that's why I left? This was the most fun job and one of the most productive I've ever had. And after seven and a half years or something like that.
You bailed on me.
I left. And you know why I left? Because of the factor. Because The college, the president's primary function is raising money.
Yes. And you were more interested in teaching and
Yeah.
learning.
And that was the problem.
And part of it is you are a dramatic change agent, and institutions can only take that rapid rate of change for so long, and then they need to regroup, and they need to have a time to mellow, probably.
Yeah.
But the changes that you help bring about, one in accreditation and one at helping us in higher education look at results rather than inputs and measuring those inputs. Another one that's still alive and well are your 3 questions. We probably frame them a little differently today. I spoke to the incoming freshmen this morning, but we're still about who am I? Because during that period of 18 to 22, particularly, probably more goes on developmentally then than from 1 to 4. It's such a time of growth and change in a student's life, and they are grappling with who am I in a way that they probably haven't for a long time in their lives, if ever before. And our role in higher education is to help people understand what is the nature of all of us and the world we live in. How is it interconnected? What have the people who've gone before us discovered about life and the universe, and how can we learn from that?
That's meaning, and that's a religious question.
It is a religious question.
I mean, it has to do with something.
And then we want students to figure out, okay, what do I do with the rest of my life? What are my dreams for the rest of my life? And you know, we have a marvelously diverse community here now. I read in the paper this morning that the Caucasian population in California is not the majority population. We're about 49% of the population. And Laverne mirrors California's population. So our students come from different cultures, different religious backgrounds, different economic backgrounds, different political and philosophical beliefs, and they've got to butt up against all of these other beliefs, and that helps them figure out who they are and what is the nature, and we still do that, and that's alive and well. Another factor about your presidency, and I think probably you made the most significant change in the history of the university, and we've been here since 1891, and we're talking in the year 2000, so it's been 109 years. I think the most significant change in that history was to start what we called first field studies, and then later it became the School of Continuing Education, and that was to provide programs for adults off campus. Could you talk a little bit, and we're talking 1968, 1969, there may have been in the United States 1 or 2 other schools doing it, but certainly not in the western region of the United States. Was anybody else doing what we call continuing education? Today, we have more competition than we've ever had. Every major school is offering adult programs off campus. What was your insight into that in 1968 and 69 when you came to Verne? What planted the seed in your mind to start that and to take us from being this self-contained little school to an institution that is truly worldwide?
I told you that before, and you kind of, it's strictly economic. It really was. I remember I used to say, you know, we have talent here. We train, and the first thing I looked at is that Laverne's always been known for teacher training. Always. When I went to college here, you see, that you went here, you either became a teacher or a preacher. Well, there were a few exceptions, but
and some became both.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. but I said, you know, we need to figure out a way to provide services that people want and that they will pay for, that they need and they want. That's important. Not just what they want, because they sometimes want what they don't need, but what they need and want. I think both of those are important. And whenever we can do that, and at this time in my here, and make a profit, we'll do it. And the reason was to support the undergraduate liberal arts program. And my point is that it really wasn't a monetary kind of thing, it was a selfish interest. But there was a tremendous need. I knew public education. I knew teacher training. That was my bag. And so I had some credibility there. I could take on the accrediting agencies about that. And I could establish product outcome stuff. When we started those classes off campus, the field studies, John, that you call it, I call it field studies.
Yes.
And you call it the School of Continuing Education, the college. And that you're right. Of all the things that we started here, that probably caught on and took on. And for the same reason, remember John Gilman, who was the president of Austin?
Sure,
College?
I do.
Okay.
Dick Gilman, yes.
He had a cat fit when we started having these programs off campus and all this kind of stuff. And he said, this is not academically something or other.
You were just way ahead of your time in seeing, and part of it was an economic need, but it was also a need that you perceived that adults needed to have educational opportunities, not just the 18 to 22-year-old.
And it fit. Yeah.
And it fit Laverne.
And today, you know.
Well, 30 years later, the School of Continuing Education has grown to some 5,000 students in operations throughout California, Alaska, and Athens, Greece, where we have 1,000 students in a program over there. And while it's provided a lot of economic support, we've internalized it as a part of our mission. And in a meeting just the other day with senior management, I said, I have a real passion for the traditional undergraduate student we serve. About 30% of our students are first-generation students, and we have this marvelously diverse undergraduate population, and there's nothing in my eyes that is more effective at leveling the playing field in California than higher education.
You get it.
But I'd also have to say that one of my missionary zeals comes to the adult learner too, because every May we see the graduates cross the platform, and a large percentage of them are adults. And we have enabled them also to prepare to pursue their dreams for the rest of their lives. And those two pieces fit so well with Laverne. And that's one of the real lasting pieces of your legacy at the institution. And it has been internalized here. One of the other things that I remember about your administration, we were talking about it, was the late 60s, early 70s. The Democratic Convention in Chicago. People took to the streets. It was power to the people. And while we may not have been as active as Berkeley, we were pretty active at Laverne. And one of the things that impressed me was that other college presidents were sequestering themselves in their offices, and they didn't want to approach the protesters or the students. It was your style to walk out of the office and say, what's this all about? Come on in, let's talk about it. You weren't defensive. In fact, I think it didn't threaten you in any way. It kind of charged your batteries to see the students so excited. And that's been a lesson that I learned, not to be intimidated by the protester, not to be defensive, but to say, let's sit down and talk about this. Can you reflect on some of those experiences you had during those tumultuous years on campuses?
That was the most exciting and satisfying thing about with the kids. I loved those kids, and I do know that most college presidents were frightened. They were threatened. They threatened the institution because they were pretty wild. Well, I did, but I'd already toned myself down when I came home. Then I came back to Laverne and met with those kids, and they were pretty. You remember when we had an on-campus TV show, and the kids started, what is it?
I do. They were something. Marching around.
And what was the guy's? The guy's still on TV now and then. The guy scared to death. And I said, And he just was really panicking because, you know, I said, hey, let's invite him in. This ought to make a good show. Yeah, he was like that, and we did. You know, we had, and that was that was lucky. I think, and I do think I have a skill at that. I think that I know how to. I understand kids, and those were kids to me. I had, you know, Bill was a student here.
Yes.
And Julie, and but they were idealistic kids. They were good kids. You gotta tell this fast story about, you know, the trustees at the time were concerned about the kids. They were concerned about the long hair and the clothes and the language and a variety of things like that. And they said, Newcomer, you gotta. This was just a few of the trustees. You gotta do something about that. You know, you gotta. I said, well, and they said, these bad kids. We can't have them. And I said, I'll make a deal with you. You go out on campus and you select 2 or 3 students at random that you think are the epitome of what you think we ought to get rid of. And ask them if they'll come and talk with you. And you do that. And then let's us talk. And they did that. And you know what? I think a lot of those kids were Church of the Brethren kids from Idaho and Washington and so forth along the way. They were good kids. They were revolting, and they were idealistic as could be, and they were revolting against a whole lot of crap that the adult world was doing, and they were idealistic, totally idealistic about it, not realistic. And anyway, they did that. The trustee came back and said, "Oh my gosh," because those are the brightest kids we had.
Yes, they were.
The kids that were doing that were of all the kids that ought to be in higher education, of all the kids who answer the 3 questions. Those are the kids, and I love that. That's what we tried to do. You remember that?
I remember very clearly.
Our effort was to try to deal effectively with those kids because we both agreed that was our future. That was it. This was a little microcosm of the world. It wasn't as bad as it was on Haight-Ashbury or some of those places. And the drugs weren't that bad in the scene here. Probably a little grass and things like that, but not so much. But it was a microcosm of the universe. And I have to admit, I that was an opportunity. I don't know anybody that had that needed opportunity. I praise the good Lord for that. That was the greatest. Those were the best 7 years I ever had in terms of satisfaction and of feeling that I was accomplishing what I wanted to. Now, a lot of other people didn't like those accomplishments, but I felt good about it, and the kids were the main thing, and that's more than you wanted to hear about.
Well, but you always focused on the student, and I was impressed with the way you handled those students, and even as you talk about it today, what you understood was they were young, they were idealistic. You used to talk a lot about teachable moments.
Yeah.
And that the best teachers are those who see a teachable moment
Ooh.
and they deviate from the script. And you saw a lot of those teachable moments in the protests here on campus, and you took those teachable moments. But you also weren't a pushover. I remember one time in a big meeting with the students when you said, I want to remind you, this is not a democracy.
Yeah.
This is a wholly owned corporation, and I'm in charge.
Yeah. And that's a neat thing about a small private college too. That's great. Right. It's a great job, you know, for that kind of thing. But the teachable moment is a critical element. You see, people who are leaders, whether it's the faculty leaders or the president leader or any people who are part of the college or the university, they have to be aware of that. If they are aware of that factor, that you create the teachable moment, and you take advantage of what created for you. What we had there with the kid within the 60s and the 70s. Somebody put this all together and dropped it right in my lap. What a God-given something or other that was.
Yeah, and you really took advantage of it.
Yeah, but you see, that wasn't really skill. That was being at the right place at the right time, but recognizing the teachable moment. Recognizing, I do that in my work now. Is I say, you know what? If you want to change something, if you want to change an organization, you have to create the teachable moment. Yeah, if you know, there's some critical things that need changing, in my opinion. We go about it in the wrong way. We tell everybody how bad those things are, and everybody gets defensive. We've got to turn that around the other way. If there's something you want to change, how do you create a situation where there are the teachable moment, where people recognize we need to do something about it?
The aha.
Aha, that's it. I'm getting ready to give a talk. They want me to talk in a Sunday school class here, maybe a real hot. I'm getting ready to give a talk. They want me to talk in a Sunday school class here, maybe a real hot class.
Well, you know, back in 1969, if somebody would said that you were going to be teaching a Sunday school class at the Laverne Church of the Brethren, I'm not sure anybody would have believed that.
I surprised the heck out of me. I'm a regular attender.
You are.
And
I don't go to church, and you do.
Yeah. Well, you know, but you've got to.
Well, we've talked a lot about the past, and we've reminisced about the past, and a lot of what you put in place during your administration has really become a part of the fabric of the university, and you helped articulate some of the issues that were important. I think you and I both realize how rapidly the world has changed in those 30 years since we worked together, and we can only imagine how quickly it's going to change in the next 30 years. One of the things that I think a lot about is how do we help an organization, and higher education has never been quick to change.
Yeah.
We've never led society, we've always followed society. How do we provide, how do we create those teachable moments within our community to help the institution understand that the young people and the adults that we're educating today are going to be living in a very different world? How do we, you talk about self-diagnosing, auto-correcting, and self-renewing organizations, and you've talked about that, maybe not in those exact words in the late 60s and early 70s, but the same concept that we needed to be self-diagnosing, we needed to be auto-correcting, self-renewing institutions to be healthy. As you look in your crystal ball for the future, what are the issues that higher education faces, and how do we bring a faculty steeped in tradition and trustees who might be on the conservative side and alumni who want it to be the way it was when they were here? How do we bring them all around to make sure we're providing the educational opportunities that our students need today?
Of course, if I knew the answer to that, I would.
You wouldn't be sitting here, you'd be out on your yacht someplace cruising the Caribbean probably.
It has to do with what you brought up a while back. You have to create, I said create the teachable moment, and the way you create the teachable moment, precede that, you have to create some disequilibrium. You have to create some dissatisfaction, some unsatisfaction, or something. Somebody's not comfortable. They're no longer. They're not comfortable. So the human organism automatically tries to get comfortable. That's just the way it works. Near would have to tell us about how that doesn't. So, but it does. And so you have to create some disequilibrium. I don't know whether that's a word or not. But then people want to get their whatever they want to get their balance, field. And so they're looking for a way to do that. That's the teachable moment. And that's what, if you look back at that, that's kind of what we did. We took advantage of that. So when you look at the future, I think people approach it wrong. I think they identify a weakness. They identify something that's wrong with an organization. And they say, this is wrong. We need to do something about it. Now, every time you say to an institution of higher education that's been there for a long time, and you say it affects the faculty or something, and you say, this is wrong, we have to change it. Bingo. People don't really like to change. Change is tough. It hurts. It's not. So how do you make change? How do you make people willing to put up with the hard work of changing? And you have to, you create that teachable moment by creating some dissatisfaction, you know, and the neat thing about this is that you really don't need to create it usually, because society will create it, and you just need to point it out. That's why the country we live in works so well, is because if things get bad, it gets corrected. That's the way we work. We work on the things that get screwed up. And if somebody thinks it isn't screwed up, you don't work on it. So if you get complacent, my last third of my career was in consulting.
Well, you were talking about our country and how it changes and how effective we are at changing things that go wrong and fixing things that go wrong. And we really do react. We don't necessarily see it coming down the road. But once it's in front of us, we change it.
Yeah.
If it's bad.
And what I guess I'm saying is it has to get bad before we change it. And you know, unfortunately, the human being, again, going back to near stuff and everything, is you get old, you get hardening of the arteries, and you get high blood pressure, and you get all kinds of things, and then you die. That's what organizations do. I mean, it seems inevitable. I mean, you take any corporation, study the history of corporations, study IB, study any of the biggies, the goodies, and study these wild ones now that I don't know anything about. But they get old, they get complacent, they get satisfied. Now, this is my thesis, or whatever you want to call it. A leader, a president, if you will, of something, a CEO, they should give leadership. And leadership means that you do help them identify, and you renew, you help them the concept of self-diagnosis, autocorrection, and the only, you have to make them want to do that. And when I say them, that's the staff or the people. Now take the public school, that's where I spent the most on it. You have no problem there because the world is screaming about reform in public education, right? And some of the teachers and organizations are like this, and those reformers are the enemy. And so it's the way you get at it is to say, you want to know how to beat the enemy? Now listen, you know, we talked about tenure, faculty tenure a little bit, you know, and tenure in the public schools is weakening, I think, in my opinion, a little bit at this point in time. But the only way you're ever going to do anything about that is to get faculty to recognize that unless they do, back to we were talking about accountability, unless they assume some responsibility for the outcomes of higher education. I'm saying the faculty assumes responsibility for that. Unless they do that, they're dead. They're saying that now loud and clear. It's just a matter of time. And the Vernes will come and go. You know, they're I don't know how many colleges have gone down the tube in the last 50 years, but they have.
Yes, they have.
And I'm not saying, but I'm, you know, you were asking a question about change and how do you get it? How do you create the teachable moment? You have to create some unrest. Now, ask me how to do that, and I say, beats me, you know. but
Well,
you explore that. You know, you get bright people in, and you talk about it. Well, that's what I learned so much down there when I worked in Florida this last 3 years. There's some bright people there, and they really bought into the idea that a group of people getting together and struggling with a problem was productive. And if you take bright people that recognize there are some problems, and you get them together and you get a good facilitator or something to go with, you can come up with some brilliant kinds of things, and particularly if you get the stakeholder, if you can get, let's go back to this tenure bit and so forth, if you get some faculty, that doesn't mean to be very many, but just a few who are saying, yeah, we need to face up to the fact that we need to be accountable for something more than just giving our lectures. And then you get them and a few others and some others together and rationalize problems. I haven't been carried away with that.
Oh, that's good material,
I
and it's
don't
important.
think any one person can do that. That isn't leadership. Real leadership is when you do it with and through other people, and you get them
A catalyst. A
catalyst.
catalyst.
A catalyst with a vision.
And someone who brings the right people together to address the issues.
That's right. Which needs to be the stakeholders. See, if you take the college like this, and you say, what is essential for the survival of the college? Students, right? Faculty, right? Alumni, support, right? Money, corporate support,
Resources.
world support,
Resources.
Those are essential. Then you look at those, and so if you're trying to change, if you want, then those are the stakeholders. Those are the people, and so it's students, faculty, it's your administration, it's your alumni, it's your corporate business world, it's your parents, it's those are your customers. Those are the ones that so when you have a problem, get a representative group of those together, and a very stimulating catalyst or whatever, somebody, and brainstorm. And you remember when it was before I came here, I worked at this Traco
Yes.
thing.
I remember you talking about it.
Situation analysis, problem analysis, solution planning, all that. They're still going strong. I worked with them back there, and see, that, to me, that's the thing that I kind of carried this myself. That's a mistake, because you do that and you become the lightning rod. That's a big mistake, because then I have to move. And so I did. See, you're doing the job. You're doing everything. You just you don't say it. You don't put it in these words. But you see, what you're doing is you're asking the right questions. If you ask the right questions, and then you involve the right stakeholders, you're gonna come with solutions, better solutions than one person who tries to do that. And so my advice is, Newcomer was that was very effective, and that helped the institution, I think, during that time, and it's a bit better place now because of it, and so forth. I accept that. But leadership, for that purpose, Yeah, I gave that. But true leadership for an institution over a long haul, that requires more finesse than I had.
I think in the history of the institution it needs both. I think we need the change agents, and you were a change agent, and you've proven now over time that the changes, the most important changes that you brought to Laverne have stood that test of time very successfully and have become an integral part of the institution. And you've mentioned several times that those 7 years as president were some of the most enjoyable of your life. And I'd have to say, looking back on my own work career, that was probably the steepest learning curve of my life. It was almost straight up as I watched you day in and day out function and watched how you operated. And I learned a great deal from that, and I've always been grateful for the fact that you took me under your wing. Here I was, wet behind the ears, a young undergraduate, and you didn't know what I was going to accomplish or where I might go, but you took me under your wing and you gave me responsibilities far beyond my years. And it was a wonderful growth opportunity that I'll never forget and I'll always be grateful for. So the teacher that you are, you were very effective.
Well, you know, and it's nice of you to say those nice things, but you know, you were, you know what I do, when I get a talent, and I lucked out with you. You know, Fosnot was the guy that set, he had you all set up there for me. Thanks, I thank to him. And you know, and when I get somebody that's got talent, I milk it, man. And I used you. But you see, I also, you know, and I tell the story just a little bit different. I one time said to you, Steve, what are you going to do? You know, what, you know, you got a college, you've been after you've been out 3 or 4 or 5 years, and this I probably embellished this a bit.
No.
I said something to the effect that, yeah, what are you going to do? And you said, you really want to know? And I said, yeah, I really like to know. And he says, you know, I'd like to sit right in your chair. I said, you're kidding. And then I sat back and I said to him, this was after about 6 years there, and I said, well, you know, Steve, there's no reason in the world why you couldn't do that.
That's right.
And
that's what you said.
So we talked about that, and I remember you calling me when you would think about going to this position or that position. And I remember when you called me about going up to San Francisco to that
to the independent colleges.
And I said, Steve, that's it. I said, you know, you found us. That you, from that you can go. It may not be Laverne, and I didn't think, you know, Laverne would happen to come open or whatever there would be, you know. But I knew from that, because you've been successful every place else you've gone. But that gave you the whole, you know, that's a perfect place to learn about college and get acquainted with the right people and everything else. And so I knew what happened. Then when it happened here, well, that was remarkable. And I said this to you, and I say it to everybody I see. You know, what you've done and what the college has done, you know, there's a lot of people involved in it, but it takes leadership and so forth. And the changes, you talk about being a change agent. It's a class act that changes something over time, and that's what you're doing. And you're doing it because you're surrounding yourself with some good people, and you know what a really good leader is. And I'm good with this. It's somebody who knows how to ask the right questions, and you are sharp, and you know how to ask the right questions. And you don't give answers. Oh, I used to give answers. You don't give answers. You ask the questions, and then you get the answers out of people. That's leadership, and that leadership lasts.
Well, you were a good teacher, and it's been fun talking with you today and reflecting on the past, but also getting some insight into the future.